What's up, y'all? Back today with a long overdue edge retention comparison test. And this time, since we have a little more data around these steels, I wanted to test two 14C28N blades of pretty different hardnesses. Now, these do have different geometries as well, and that's kind of part of what I want to test. It's not a mystery that a higher hardness steel has better edge retention. So I want to see when, let's just say we're just comparing these two knives as well. The Vixino Rockshark, this specific one has not been tested. So big asterisk next to that, but Taylor Hardness did test 4 of the Vixino Rocksharks, and they all came out between 60 and 60.2 Rockwell. So I think there is an asterisk with that, but I think it's pretty safe to assume that this one is going to be around that hardness as well. They've shown very good consistency. Vosteed, on the other hand, has not shown very good consistency with their heat treats. This specific porcupine, let's see, where are our dots? Are those coming up? This specific porcupine did have its hardness tested and came out to 57.6. That is pretty poor hardness for 14C28N. Now, these I think are around between 70 and 80 bucks for the porcupine, and the Rocksharks I believe come in around 60. The Vixino Rockshark is 17.7 degrees per side sharpened, and it is, let's see how thick it is behind the edge. 12.5 thousandths behind the edge with a 17.7 degree per side edge. That was the factory edge. I did just touch it up with a 600 grit stone, so they did both have that same initial edge. But the geometries are very different. This one is thinner, and it has a shallower edge angle. The Vosteed Porcupine, 15.5 thousandths behind the edge, 15.5, 16. Still pretty good. Still really good geometry, especially on a more budget knife. Not bad slicing geometry at all for this one, but it has a 22.5 degree per side edge, and I was just kind of trying to match the factory edge on both of these. Of course, we can always reprofile stuff to thinner, but I kind of wanted to see what these had to offer out of the factory, but I did just do a 600 grit edge on them just so I know they had a similar starting point as far as the condition of the actual apex goes. So let's go ahead and take some initial sharpness testing with the sharpness test with the best tester, and then we can go ahead and go out and we'll do 150 cuts through cardboard. I'll find similar sized pieces for each of them. Normally I'll take the same size of pieces, divide them in 2, and so I have the same overall length of cut, and then we'll do 50 cuts through some sizzle rope, and then we'll see how those edges held up. Now this really is just testing the fine edge, but I think a lot of the sharpening junkies and knife guys out there, they like keeping a really fine edge. They like keeping like a shaved sharp edge on a knife, which I definitely am one of those people too. So we'll just see kind of how quickly or how much of that edge degrades with that testing. So let me get this in frame here. So let's go ahead and start with the Rockshark. And now for the porcupine. All right, our initial sharpness for the Vixino Rockshark is an average of 151, and the initial sharpness for the Vosteed Porcupine is 137. So again, this is going to be more of a test. Think of this as a test of what you can get more out of the ideal conditions compared to less than ideal conditions. So what more could we ask for? The higher end of 14C hardness, great geometry, great edge angle, not terrible geometry on this one, but definitely ideal versus less than ideal. I would say the heat treat is probably terrible on this one, but let's go ahead and do some cuts, come back and test the sharpness again, and we will compare from there. All right, both of these knives performed pretty well, but the Rockshark with the better geometry definitely felt better. By the time I'd gotten to the rope, it was just getting through it so much easier, and you could tell it was just like going through the cardboard like it wasn't even there. So while better geometry can lead to better edge retention, it can also lead to better cutting performance. You'll feel less resistance when you're passing through material because, of course, you've got smaller thickness behind the edge. So let's see how these cut just some paper. And of course, beforehand, they were shaving, they were cutting paper. I forgot to show that, but generally when you have that 130 to 150 range on the best tester, it's going to give you that performance. So let's see how we are getting through this. Magazine paper, not too bad, not too bad. Little rougher than a fresh edge would. It's catching a little bit. It's taking some work. You know, it's not effortless the way a fresh edge is, but it's still. Yeah, this particular type of ad paper can be rough to get through. All right. We're cutting. We're still perfectly functional. We're at a nice working edge, but we really want to see how much of that fine edge we lost. Let's see if the Vixino will shave. No, I want to stay away from the top part. Okay, so where the edge was actually getting used, no, it's not shaven. Of course, it probably will still here up close towards the tip, but we're not testing that on the best tester or with the paper either. Let's see how the Vosteed Porcupine does with the magazine paper. It's giving a little more resistance. We're getting in there. It's not too bad. Not too bad at all, actually. Let's see. We're tearing there. Sometimes when you get on these like kind of frilled edges of that paper, it doesn't want to get started as much. You know, we're catching up a little bit. If we try to get it just right, we can hit a spot, but yeah, definitely still perfectly functional, not cutting as well as it was before, but the best tester will give us a little more accurate results. Let's see if we're shaving at all. And no, nothing at all. They still feel, you know, they don't feel necessarily dull. Like there's still a nice working edge on there. So let's put some numbers to it and see how they did. We will start with the Rockshark. All right, and now for the Porcupine. All right, so the Porcupine had an initial sharpness, again, of on average 137 grams to cut the line. That went up on average to 339, or an increase of 202 grams. The Rockshark had an initial sharpness of 151, and that increases to 234 for only an increase of 83 grams. So we had, relative to this test, more than double the edge retention and much better ease of use with the Rockshark than the Porcupine. So when you see just 14C28N on a steel, it can mean two very different things. You can get two very different performances. Now, of course, if you're into sharpening, reprofiling, and all that stuff, we could probably optimize the edge angle on the Porcupine a little bit, but thickness behind the edge isn't really probably something you're going to want to try to fix on a $70 knife. So things like geometry and edge angle and heat treat, all put together, you know, you can see how much of a difference it actually makes. People talk about, oh, why is heat treat important? Why do these just couple of points really make that much of a difference? So we can see we can combine good heat treat, good geometry for, I think, a little bit of a cheaper knife in the same steel. Then you can get that much more ease of use and that much more long-term performance on it. Thank you for watching.